Hi guys, so this is Muskan Agarwal again, and here we are with the topic of encryption. In the last video, I'm really sorry, the voice was so like weak, and the topic which I discussed, I think it's not clear. So here in this video, we will just discuss about encryption. We will know the we will get the idea about encryption, how it works, what are the different type of encryption, and everything. And slowly I'll make another video for encoding and hashing, where I'll cover them as in detail also, which will be like clear enough to understand. So let's start with encryption as of now. Encryption, as I said in my last video, it's basically a two-way process. It's a reversible thing. That means two-way process. There is some plain data. There is a cryptographic algorithm, and then through that cryptographic algorithm, the data is being passed. It is encrypted using the private and the public key, and an encrypted data is generated or is obtained, which is passed to the server. So here there is a client, okay, and there is a server. So there is a communication between the client and the server. Each and every system works in this way. We are the clients. We are communicating to the server in some other way, in one or another way. Just like, for example, I would say in the Google, we put some data, like we put in the search data. So that is the request which we are sending to the Google server, that, hey Google, give me this data. That suppose I'm looking for the meaning of I would say server encryption only. That what is encryption? So this is my request. My request is what is encryption. Get me the meaning of it. So that request is being sent to the Google server. So this from my side to the Google server, the request. There are a lot of operations being happening in the backend, in which, like in just a matter of milliseconds, if you will write down in the Google what is encryption, they'll give you the response in, I think, milliseconds maximum. It won't take even second, right? So like for the millisecond operation also, right, there are a lot of queries being running in the backend and a lot of things happening in the backend, and it's getting you the response quickly, like in a matter of real time, right? So what is exactly happening? We will deep dive into it slowly. First of all, we will cover up here the encryption. So whatever request I'm sending to the Google server, it is encrypted. It is either symmetrically encrypted or asymmetrically encrypted. So we'll also go through that symmetric and asymmetric later in this video. Now here, encryption basically happens between client and the server communication. So client is sending a request to the server. This request is being encrypted by either a public key or a private key, by a key which is common between the client and the server. The server decrypts that particular request again with the same key which is known to the client and the server, and sends the response which is encrypted again. So this works both way. Like encrypted request is sent, it decrypts, it generates the response, encrypt the data, and then send back to the client. So this is how encryption works actually in the like communication between the client and the server. Now as I said, it's a two-way process. It's a reversible process. Two-way process, a reversible process. So reversible, as I said, that there is some data which is passed to some cryptographic or encryption algorithm, and a ciphertext or an encrypted data is obtained, right? Though so there was earlier, like lot of this encryption came into the picture. There was an earlier time, if you might have read about some encryption thing, right? So you would know about Caesar cipher. So that was a kind of encryption algorithm that was used in the earlier times, so that enemy could not know the message, the secret message being sent or shared between the king and his people. So that was one of the encryption algorithm. And here the ciphertext I'm talking about, the encrypted data which we obtained after passing our the data, the original data, the plain data, through the cryptographic algorithm. That is also known as the ciphertext, because that is an encrypted data that cannot be decoded without knowing a particular key. Now what is the picture of this key? First of all, I'll discuss that. Later on we will go to the encryption, how it uses the key in the encrypting of the things. So the key, You might know about TCP, TLS, handshakes, SSL certificates. It's more of a networking concept. I will not deep dive into it, but there is a thing that is a SSL certificate. So whenever you are creating or you are designing a server, you will have to go register for a SSL certificate, obtain that certificate. That SSL certificate will have a public and a private key, which will be known only to you and which you can use. That public key will be available publicly, so that if any of the client or any of the server wants to communicate to your system or to your server, they can validate your public key that your server is valid and legal. So that is done through your SSL certificate. Now next, once this validation is completed, the the communication will be established between you or the client, between server to server, and many on. So the SSL certificate is important over here. Now, during the TCP handshake, the network communication is established. So during the TCP handshake, SSL certificate is shared. I'll just write over here during the TCP handshake. Okay. So during the TCP handshake, what is done? Network communication is established. Communication is established. And the SSL certificate is shared between the client and the server. Okay. During the TCP handshake, the network communication is established. That is, a client sends a hello message to the server. That includes the client will send a request to the server that, okay, I am establishing a network, that I am establishing some connection between with you, server. So it will send, the client will send some of its client random. That means some of its it will send the client private key or the public key, which will be used for the communication further on, and it will also share the TLS version it is using. So TLS version is important during the SSL certificate. SSL or TLS certificate, these are the same. If you would read about it, you can just go through what is TCP, what is TLS, what is SSL certificate. I'll not deep dive into it. I'm just using these terms and telling you that how this key is generated, or how this key is decided between the client and the server. So this TLS version, so like it has to be same between the client and the server, or client will send a list of the TLS versions, and server, whichever it is using, it will choose that okay, we can use this TLS version. So client will send the TLS version, the client random, and the cryptographic algorithm which it is using, it wants to use to encrypt the further request. So it will also send the algorithms. Once server gets that communication request, it will see that, okay, client is legal, the TLS version it can be accepted, and the algorithm can also be accepted from the client. So server will send an exception or acknowledge request to the client that, okay, I have acknowledged your request, this is my SSL certificate, you can obtain the keys from the certificate, and this is my algorithm, this is the TLS version, and everything it will be sending back to the client. So this is completely the TCP handshake which is going on. TCP handshake. Okay, so this is the TCP handshake going on. So in the TCP handshake, client sends a request or communication request to the server with the client random, the keys included, the TLS version, the cryptographic algorithm which will be used further in the encryption of the data in the request. Server will then acknowledge that request by validating the client. Then it will send the SSL certificate, the server random, the algorithm, the TLS version, and everything. So it will send that back. And then this is the TCP handshake. Once the TCP handshake or the network communication is established, it will further move to the TLS handshake, in which the request is done. The keys are decided. So client will be obtaining that keys, the public or the private key or a common key will be decided between the client and the server during the TLS handshake. Okay, so these are two things. TLS handshake, so it will be the keys are decided between the client and the server. Okay, So there is TCP handshake, in which SSL certificate is being shared, network communication is established. TLS handshake, where the keys are decided between the client and the server. So now there are two types of encryption. So we have understood about the term encryption, how it works. There is a key. The main thing over here is key. The key is used to encrypt the data. It is passed through some algorithm, like the cryptographic algorithm, and an encrypted data is generated or is obtained, which is used for the communication, like for the request and the response between the client and the server. So that's the whole concept of the encryption. Now, how this encryption is of two types. Encryption is of two types, that is symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Just please forgive me for my handwriting. Symmetric and asymmetric. Cool. So symmetric and asymmetric. Symmetric means there is only one. Symmetric means there is only one key decided between, or there is only one key between the client and the server, which is used for encrypting and decrypting the data. So one key that is being, again I just said that it will be decided in the TLS handshake, that okay, which key we are using. Either we are generating a random key or we are using any of the public or the private key from the client and the server. So symmetric encryption works on the logic of only one key that is already decided between the client and server, and it is used for encryption and decryption both. While in the asymmetric key, it is a concept of two keys, public and private, public and private. That means public and private key on the client end, public and private on the server end. And like these both keys are used to encrypt and decrypt the data. So it's more secure, it's way more secure. Asymmetric encryption is way more secure. In the symmetric key, if a key is known to the like a third party or a hacker, so he or she can be able will be able to decrypt our data. It is quite complex because there is the cryptographic algorithm which we have used. The hacker should know about that as well. Still, it makes it a bit more like there is some security breach, I would say, if the key is known to the third party. So better than that, use the asymmetric, that there is only public and private key which is only known to the client and the server. There is no way to decrypt it or to hack that keys or to hack the cryptographic algorithm. People do. I'm not saying that it's not at all possible. It might be possible for the people who are really expert in the hacking thing. So, but for the security purpose, it's the most widely used. Asymmetric encryption is the most widely used. While symmetric, it's better for the like bulk information, bulk request, bulk communication, I would say, and it's like the load time is really less, so it's like good. But asymmetric, since it holds more security, it's widely used for the more secure purpose, like for the transactions. Asymmetric encryption will be used in the case of transactions, where it is the security is our like the main goal. Security has to be the main goal. So we can't actually afford security vulnerability in our transactions. So asymmetric encryption will be matter of like implementation in that case. Now, symmetric encryption, as I said, between the client and the server, there is only one key which is used to encrypt and decrypt the data. Okay, it's client and the server. While asymmetric, so there is a client, there is a server. Client will hold, I would say, a public key and a private key. Server will also hold its own public key and a private key. So what client will do is, client will encrypt the data. It will pass through some cryptographic algorithm, and it will encrypt the data using the public key of the server. Client cannot know like the private key of the server. It's only known to the server, right? It can obtain the public key from the SSL certificate. So client will encrypt the data using the public key of the server, and will send the request. Just a minute, sorry. It will send the request to the server, which can only be decrypted, by the private key of the server. Understood the difference between symmetric and asymmetric? Asymmetric में क्या होता है कि client will जो होता है, it will encrypt the data using the public key of server, जो कि decrypt हो सकता है सिर्फ और सिर्फ by the private key of the server. So there are two things, public key and the private key. Client public key से encrypt करता है, server private key से decrypt करता है. It goes the same way that it is, the response is encrypted using the public key of the client, which can only be decrypted using the private key of the client. So this is the concept of asymmetric encryption, which is way more secure. And in the symmetric encryption, there is only one key between them. So I hope you understood the concept of encryption and the types of encryption. Encryption is basically some plain data, I would say just the data, some cryptographic algorithm, and then the key thing, the encryption. This cryptographic algorithm will use certain type of key, the private key or the public key or the random key, which is being decided between the client and the server, and it will give us the encrypted data. Okay, so this is how encryption works. This is how symmetric and asymmetric encryption works. Now in this encryption, there are a lot of things, like we have authorization, we have authentication, we have JWT token, we have refresh tokens, we have OAuth tokens. So there are a lot of things being revolved around this, and I'll make a video in which I'll just give a brief about how Google works, how when you write a statement in the Google tab, what exactly happens in the backend of the Google or in the backend of it. So there are these all things like encrypting, decrypting, TLS, handshake, TCP handshake. This is all being done in a matter of milliseconds when you just type something in the Google. So this is all happening, and there are a lot of things more happening besides this. We will go deep dive into it slowly, like we will take slowly one by one the concept. Next video I'll make encoding and hashing as well, and then we'll go to the JWT token and the refresh tokens. I hope you will like this video, you'll enjoy this video, and whatever doubts you have, please do write into the comments. See ya. Please do like, share and subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye.